radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right, here we go. How you doing? How you doing? Fade to Black, Monday, May 6th, 2024. I love it. I mean, I love it when I start each week and I say Monday. Yeah. It's just, yeah. You want to be me. You do. Oh, by the way, I'm Jimmy Church. I'm your host of this thing. But Monday means another great week coming up on Fade to Black. And that's exactly what's going on right now. Tonight, live from Australia, by the way, tonight, Ryan Musgrave-Evans is with us. Now, we're going to cover a lot of ground today. I've called this show CTs, Cryptoterrestrials. Now, it's not my term. We'll be talking about all of that tonight, what it means and so forth. But by doing that with tonight's show, we can go in any direction. We're going to be doing that tonight with Ryan. I'm very excited. I'm a big fan of his. And to finally have him on the show, this is really special. It's going to be a great night. Tomorrow night, every night this week is big. Well, it's like that every week, right? Tomorrow night, Tuesday, Ryan S. Wood. That's right. The Ryan Wood is on the show. Now, how strange is it to have two guests 2 nights in a row with the name Ryan? I've done a lot of shows. That's a first for me. So, yeah, tomorrow night, Ryan Wood. And one of the hardest working, one of the biggest voices, of course, and his father, Bob Wood, in ufology. So tomorrow night, the show is titled The ET Agenda. And if anybody's got their finger on the pulse of what's happening and what's gone on in the past, it's Ryan Wood. So that is a big show tomorrow night. And then we follow that up with Wednesday night. Nancy Thames is with us. Whew, man, former Department of Defense employee is going to be with us, and we're going to be talking about the truth of ET contact. And just when you say, okay, Jimmy, all UFOs this week, is this UFO week on Fade to Black? Not so fast, because we're going to wrap up the week this week with Jim Harold. Jim Harold is back with us. And I say it every time he's on the show. When I grow up, I want to be Jim Harold, one of the great voices in broadcast. And nobody does hosts like Jim Harold. So, and that's another great thing when Jim is on the show, because I can take a night off. I just give him the keys to the car. He's got a new book out. It's called True Ghost Stories. And so we'll be doing that. And it's really funny with Jim is he has spent so many years. He's one of the biggest podcasts and one of the biggest just brands out there, but has always centered things on ghosts and you know what? Halloween, October. You can't get him on the show. He has booked a year in advance to go on other shows because he's so good. But lately, he's been ET. He's been UFO. He's been going there. So I'm going to pull him off of that and get him back to his roots. And that'll be Thursday night. Jim Harold is with us. So very, very big week coming up. And then I have a big weekend. This Sunday is the premiere Billy Carson's new TV show right here in Los Angeles. The TV series is called Anunnaki. It's a full-on red carpet, all-day event with presentations and all of that. And this is going to be at Regal Cinemas in downtown Los Angeles, the biggest theater in L.A. And that says a lot. We are Hollywood. And that is Sunday, May 12th, this Sunday. And the links for tickets are below. Okay, so I will see you there. Then coming up right after that, which is the weekend of June 10th, is DisclosureFest, Stairway to the Stars. Also right here in Los Angeles at Castaic Lake. This is the biggest, most colorful event of the year. So you can go to DisclosureFest.org, get your tickets. The links are below. The entire weekend schedule is posted up. There's a map. This is outdoors. This is, I would like to see, in the past, we've done 20,000 people. I would like to, see 10,000. Which is probably going to happen. It's that big. Go and look at the map, look at the stages, look at the schedule of events and how we've got everything set up. DisclosureFest.org. Here we go. And Stairway to the Stars, right? We're doing both events in one. And so with that, let's get straight to it. Live from Australia, Ryan Musgrave-Evans is with us. And like I said, I've called this show Cryptoterrestrials, and we're going to discuss his research into all of that and what is here, what is visiting us, what is influencing us, and every aspect of that. It is a very broad subject tonight. We're going to get into everything. He lives in Victoria, Australia. He's got a diploma in elementary teaching from Swinburne University in Melbourne, Bachelor's of Arts with first-class honors in philosophy. That's right. He waxes philosophy. We're going to be doing that from La Trobe University in Bandora, Melbourne. And private language tutor of Irish and Scottish Gaelic. That's right. He speaks Gaelic. We're going to do all of that tonight with Ryan. His website and his YouTube channel are below. We've also got it over on our website and throughout social media. And I would like to welcome for the first time to Fade to Black, all the way from Australia, Ryan Musgrave-Evans. Ryan, how you doing, brother?
G'day, man. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm good. It's good over here.
I feel like I'm interviewing Zach Wilde. And not the first time you've heard that, I'm sure. But
I don't know who that is.
That's even
embarrassment for tonight. Yes. Unaware.
He's a guitar
He's a handsome
player.
man, evidently.
He is dashing. And you know what? On stage, he used to play with Ozzy Osbourne. That still does once in a while. One of the great guitar players in the world. But when we're done tonight, you can go and look him up. Maybe I'll pop up a picture of him. He plays in a kilt.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's
very
cool.
Yeah. His beard. Yeah, no, it's. I'm feeling. I'm going to watch the chat as I say that. Yeah. Okay. Everybody agrees with me. He's
a doppelganger I don't know about.
Yeah, he is. He's got this image of. I've got to get the first time guest disclaimer out of the way. He's got this image. He's big, biker, beard thing, leather, black leather, but wears a kilt, and because he can. He's a big dude. And who's going to say something of nobody, right? So I think that's why he does it. Anyway, he's an amazing player, but this image that he's got, and I've done it, and there's plenty of pictures of Zach and I out there on the internet together. But you talk to him, you hang out with him, and he is the coolest down dude like ever. The image, right? The image.
Yeah,
And then it's just like, man, you're just a pushover. You're just
I'm a bit of a teddy bear as well, so you've got me pegged, I think.
Right on, Ryan. Okay, so you get the first-time guest disclaimer. So let's get that out of the way. Ryan, it's just you and I sitting on my couch having a conversation as friends. And where the conversation starts, it starts. Where it ends. But we're going to end as friends. You have to accept, and then we'll do the show.
Yeah.
That's it. That's just
done. Yeah, that sounds like a mission. That sounds excellent. That sounds relaxed enough. But
that's what we're going to do.
You're a famous dude, a bit intimidating. So, but we'll
right.
Make it work still.
Right. Yeah, we'll get through it. The subject today is out in front. You've been researching this for a long time, and you're also educated and researched not only with this subject, but with history and cultures around the world. And so to the rest of the world, it seems like it's a new subject. It's not. And the influence, probably, we don't know, but could go back millions of years. Not, this isn't some modern thing, but those that are learning about the subject today for the first time think that this is a modern, that this is all, and that's simply not the case. So let's talk about you first. How did your interest get started in this? Was it because of your location in Australia where all the cool stuff happens, it seems like? Family member? Was it a personal experience? What got your interest into the subject?
Well, I have had lifelong experiences, and some of them are pretty intense. But originally, when I was a kid, I thought some of the experiences I was having were... Well, I had them pegged as something like fairy contact or elf contact or something. That was the way I interpreted that at the time. These kinds of things would happen on and off. One stage I saw a figure amongst trees that looked like some kind of being that was monkey-like, but had its skin was textured like bark and had big eyes, and it was hiding behind a tree, and I thought it's a fairy. And so I had these weird experiences when I was a kid. But what happened is, as an adult, some of the experiences took on more of a typical UFO high-tech bent, more sort of like stereotypical abduction event kind of contact. And then it occurred to me that there was a continuity here, that maybe some of the events I was having when I was younger, that I was interpreting along the lines of being fairy contact or something like that. And the more UFO kind of typical mainstream pop culture sort of ET more vibe to some of the more recent stuff, that maybe this was continuous contact with the same race or races, which got me very interested in Jacques Vallée. So that was only around about 2012, 2013 that I started having these more full-on sort of abduction event kind of things that we can talk about if you want to. But that honed my interest and really got sparked my interest into doing research into comparing ancient phenomena, like you were saying yourself, mythical beings in history and superstition and folklore, taking down the profile points of the appearance of those beings, the kinds of effects and influences they have on the minds of people in the past, and then modern UFO lore and the similarities between them. And Jacques Vallée wrote his seminal work, Passport to Magonia. So I think he was one of the first people that really perceived that, which now in hindsight might seem an obvious connection, but he, I think, was one of the first to notice the similarity between the non-human entities of past times and those kinds of reports and what we consider to be this very modern phenomenon normally today. Mm-hmm. kidnapping people, abducting people interested in breeding or taking samples from them. And Jacques Vallée's book was very interesting. That got me onto Mac Tonnies as well, because Mac Tonnies had based a lot of his ideas on Jacques Vallée. And Mac Tonnies, the late great Mac Tonnies, he died very young, unfortunately. He was only 34, I believe. He passed away in 2009. If he'd had the good fortune of having a longer life, I'm sure he would have done amazing things and written even more great books. And he's just an incredible thinker. And what he did anyway was momentous, I think, with his cryptoterrestrial hypothesis. So he coined that term. And I know at the beginning when you were introducing me and you said that you didn't come up with that idea, I didn't come up with it either. It was the man himself. So cryptoterrestrial, crypto meaning hidden or secret from the Greek, and terrestrial, earthling. And then, of course, extraterrestrial, and the extraterrestrial hypothesis is the mainstream conclusion that most people have come to about the races and their origins behind modern abduction phenomena and modern UFO sightings and whatnot. Mac Tonnies had a look at that and said, and agreed with Jacques Vallée in many respects, but had his own twist on it as well. But he said the cryptoterrestrial hypothesis, or CTH for brevity, explains better potentially explains better the mechanisms behind some of these abduction events and the reports. For instance, off the top of my head, I think of 2 points in particular. Modern abduction law or events or testimony, witness testimony, talks about the beings often being interested in our DNA. And B, often the beings themselves seem very interested in the biosphere of the Earth and the health of our biosphere and us not polluting the environment or using advanced weaponry or energy systems that could potentially pollute it, and these kinds of things. And Mac Tonnies said extraterrestrials that truly evolved someplace else don't have an evolutionary relationship with our planet. Why, A, would they be interested in us genetically, and B, so concerned about our planet? So he suggested they were indigenous. So cryptoterrestrial really means like indigenous humanoid. And he didn't necessarily believe this is, he had this as a theory. He said theoretically it answers the question better than the extraterrestrial hypothesis. And I've embraced that term as well and think that it's quite appropriate. I think a lot of terms are appropriate enough and might do the trick. But for me in particular, I've settled on this particular term. Ultra-terrestrials is another one that I think is probably an interesting enough and fairly appropriate term that you could use as well. But so that's what really got me into the research, that I'd had my own experiences. Make a long story short, maybe too late. Had my own experiences when I was younger, and then they increased dramatically in the past, say 15 years maybe, and became very much more obviously recognizable as in keeping with modern UFO high-tech abduction stuff.
Every time, that's very interesting. Every time I think that, and I'm speaking for the community here too as well, because we all go through this. Every time I think that I'm getting close to like narrowing things down, then that branches out. And it's like I'm glad you said that ETH, CTH, okay, but it's too much. Hold on for a second. Hold on. Something happened with one of our streams. Just hang on. It's another computer. That is strange. Okay. I am going to restart. And hang on. Okay. Very strange. Okay. So everybody that is listening out there on that set of streams, They just got 2 shows. The second one is just called Fade to Black. So, but there is too much of it going on, and that and all of the experiences are similar and different at the same time. We're not seeing the same types of craft being repeated or the same types of beings being, we do to a point, but also you can hear the descriptions from everybody being so vastly different. And that would suggest to me that there isn't just one specific thing going on, that there is a lot of awareness of planet Earth. And so there could be visitations that are singular, drive-bys only once, and then they're off doing their thing. And then there's others that may have been here for a very, very, very long time. So long that now they call Earth home. But once we start to get some real answers, then we'll know what's going on. But it could be like a little bit of a lot, right? From each direction, because we have the physical side, like you said, you went through a technical experience, right?
Yeah.
Then you have the other part. And when Jacques Vallée first suggested this, it was a little bit difficult for people to grasp hold of. It took him, and he's still preaching it, right? It took people a couple of decades to start to come on board with Jacques, because everybody was stuck with metal craft, little green men piloted, across the vastness of space and arriving here at Earth, and to think about something else that we clearly don't understand and possibly can't even see. That's something different altogether, isn't it?
It is, for sure. Yeah. I think Mac Tony's, the way he differed from Jacques Vallée is he brought it back to being even more sort of technological and mundane and nuts and bolts. So Jacques Vallée, yes, he had these excellent ideas, and still has, of course, these excellent ideas about the similarities and the possible continuity between these different races that were present in the past and are still. But he often talked about them as being interdimensional and in some way intangible in some ways, and things like that as well, or at least have the potential to be like that. And Mac Tony's took that as well, and I think he did a good move in this respect. I think it's pushed the investigation into these beings in a good direction, which is he brought it back to the nuts and bolts, and he said the beings, even if they are capable of interdimensional travel, or they're more mystical or intangible in some kind of way, they don't necessarily have to be. We don't necessarily have to go there. We can go there eventually if it takes us there. But theoretically speaking, they could be flesh and blood and bone just like us, but be so advanced technologically that they can behave as if they are intangible at times, or they can behave as if they change and take on other appearances. They can, through advanced technologies, they can be here in this dimension and very real, but unknowable and untouchable to us through, say, manipulation of our consciousness, but through technological means, through missing time, through stealing memories, or through powers of suggestion and things like that crop up all through different UFO cases, and also the power of the fairies in the past to manipulate our minds, take our memories, missing time, very similar kinds of things. But and I agree with Mac that unless you bring it down to Earth to a certain extent, you'll never catch them. You'll never find them. It's almost like if you say, we consider the analogy of maybe looking for a serial killer or a serial criminal. You say, you have to all agree initially that he's real and that he's a man and he's out there somewhere. And then you start looking for patterns of behavior and profile points. and build a picture slowly through different cases of what he looks like. How does he dress? How does he move? What's his modus operandi and things like that. But the initial move is presuming, and it might seem like a silly thing to say, presuming he's real, he's not imaginary, he's out there, he's flesh and blood. And I think you have to do that as well. And that's what Mac Tonnies was sort of trying to do, where he pulled Jacques Vallée's theory sort of back a little bit back again into like the concrete of saying, let's just say, even if they're advanced enough to dazzle us, confuse us, and seem magical, let's just say they're not, and then try to find them. And I think unless you begin there, we'll never find them, because it's very easy.
Well, let's stop right there for a second. I'll tell you why that is so fascinating. You have this idea and this theory. Not you, I mean just in general, right? We have this theory that is out there. And it seems crazy. But yet, those that would say that is crazy still watch Star Trek and watch the teleporter. They're okay with that. And so when you right? So think about that for a second. The teleporter, the human disappears and then reappears somewhere else, possibly maybe in front of somebody else. And if you see that, and then you see them teleport back to the Enterprise or the Discovery or whatever show you happen to be watching, you would think you're looking at something interdimensional. You're looking at a human, flesh, bones. So what, if we're okay with the suggestion of that tech, and by the way, we all want the teleporter to be real. We don't have any issues with that, right? But suddenly when we apply that to ET, no, that's crazy talk. It's like you can't have it both ways. And that's exactly what you're talking about. And if ET is getting to this planet, or they have that, they have technology that we don't understand yet. It's really that simple, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I try to steer a course in that direction, that the beings, the races, and whatever you want to call them, we'll call them Cryptoterrestrials for now, that they have the capacity to produce effects in our mind that can bedazzle us and make us think things are happening that aren't. But also they, as well, would appear to be able to move through walls and teleport, etc., move at incredible speeds by way of tangible physical technology. Just push it onward, push it further. What are we capable of now? What would we as Homo sapiens be capable of in another 100 years, another 1,000 years? And then, the difference between a mystical reality and magic and the world of physical, tangible hardware, I must admit, they start to blur once the sophistication becomes so incredible. Once the people have the capacity to look like they're doing magic in a kind of a way, I suppose you could say they are. It certainly would appear so to more primitive people, etc. But yeah, the Mac Tonnies point of beginning with the hardware and then thinking out, I agree with, is the way to go, rather than thinking mystical first and then getting lost in those kinds of ghostly ideas where there's nothing tangible to really grip and study and make profiles of and things like that. So I've tried to make what I call the CT profile, cryptoterrestrial profile, and I, in my books, begin from ancient, particularly Celtic mythology, particularly Gaelic mythology and things like that. I'm wearing a jumper at the moment that says "Speak Gaelic to me." I'm a real nerd when it comes to Gaelic language and history and mythology and whatnot. But some of the beings spoken about in ancient Gaelic mythology, in particular Nahuishlan, the gentry, they lived in mountains and subterranean dwellings. They abducted humans. They'd come as what was called Llananshi, or fairy lover, which is like a kind of succubus or incubus or things like that. They could bedazzle humans. They'd chirp and whistle like birds to each other. They had fair skin. They were tall and thin. Now, that's a perfect description of Charles Hall's tall whites. Every one of those every one of those profile points that I just hit there on Nahuishlan in Gaelic mythology is a perfect description of the tall whites that Charles Hall wrote about in his millennial hospitality books that he first started publishing in the early 2000s. And have a similar appearance or the same appearance to beings that I've seen. Chris Bledsoe, I believe, is an experiencer of the same race again. Many different people that claim experiences in modern times, in my opinion, are all having experiences with this particular race, and there are more than one, but this particular one is the one I'm most interested in because it corresponds most closely to the beings that I have had interactions with. And there you have it. Once you have these tangible beings and you presume they're real like that, you can find these profile points. It's incredibly compelling when you slowly build the profile as you go.
Okay. So with that in mind, and Charles Hall and his first encounter, and when he writes about it, it's so compelling because he felt that he was watching a teacher and a student. Right, and it was a class going on in the desert, and that was pretty interesting because that would indicate a permanent presence here, somewhere. And then if you flip this over and you go to an experience like with Travis Walton, right, or and go to, or Betty and Barney Hill is another great example of this, where now we're talking about a craft and being on that craft. That's not fairy folk. And although fairies are real and could be cryptoterrestrial, by the way, but they're not. You don't have the experience with witnesses that are involving a craft with a cryptoterrestrial. And that's the scarier part, is that they could be among us right now and have been, and we wouldn't necessarily know it if we saw it, right?
Yeah, I think this particular race that I follow, that Charles Hall coined the name for, tall whites. I think before then, normally in ufology, in general, they were more often referred to as Nordics. And I understand now that tall whites and Nordics are terms that are used fairly interchangeably in ufology. But from what I can gather, Charles Hall seems to be the first person to have used that term tall whites to speak of tall, fair ETs. They don't look exactly like us. Their eyes are much larger. Their noses are less pronounced. Their ears are less pronounced. They have longer faces, pointed chins. But through use of technologies, they can influence our perception of them and look more like images of people we know, perhaps, or more like something we'd be accustomed to that wouldn't alarm us as much in the way they're presenting themselves. Or even, and this comes from Charles Hall's accounts and the accounts of many other people as well, they go fairly low tech and use disguises where they'll wear big glasses, they'll wear wigs that are fairly obviously fake. And because they're so thin and sort of emaciated in appearance, they'll wear big heavy coats so they look more like us. And can move, combining high technologies to influence our minds and our perception, but also combining that with, physical, fairly low-tech makeup and things like this, and props. They can pass amongst us and have done and do, in my opinion. And Charles Hall talks about that in a fair few of his books, how he had seen them out and about, he thought, at a casino and things like that. And other people didn't seem to notice them, but he did. But the power to manipulate the mind, I think, is something that comes into all of this, and I consider that to be, some of the races I think can do it with their minds, as though their brains, perhaps through genetic engineering or something, have the capacity to manipulate the minds of people and animals around them. But the tall whites seem to be reliant on hardware in helmets they wear on their heads. And they can wear these things under wigs and whatnot, and then suggest things to you, confuse your mind, bedazzle you, freeze you, wipe your memory, and all these kinds of things. And do the Jedi mind trick, basically, as well. Just nothing to see here, mate. That kind of thing, I think, is one of the ways they move amongst around us.
Now, what about and staying right here, by the way, Ryan, what about your own experiences? What is it that you have seen and to help guide your own research?
Well, the first of the big ones I had most recently, I was out on the porch of like a veranda at our place, and was taken up started to levitate up around the outside of the roof, and then suddenly was in a bed. And there was a tall, thin man feeling around in my mouth, wandered around behind, and then used a drill into the back of my head. There was a sound like this rough scratching sound, and I thought of it almost like a shovel being drawn across the surface of concrete or something. Over and over again in the room, the strange room I was in, there's a woman with huge blue eyes. They, at that stage, weren't really communicating much to me at all. Although I could see images flashing through my mind as well, as though they were trying to calm me, images of forests and things like that. Other interactions I've had with them have been even more intense than that, where in my kitchen once I was talking to someone that I thought was my wife at the time, and then my mind sort of glazed over. I fell down to my knees and then started levitating, was taken back into my room, taken over the top of my wife who was asleep, dropped down onto the bed, and I hadn't even laid down yet, and I could hear the door open and close, and then a voice said right in the middle of my head, "We just had a date. I roll my eyes at you," when I started to have a fearful response. I had said to them and articulated this in my mind because I'd had these sort of like tabletop inspections and sort of like more typical abduction phenomena kind of medical examinations or whatever. Why don't one of you come and have a coffee with me? If you're real, come into my house and have some kind of interaction with me. So then that intense interaction happened, and I have no idea how I was convinced that it was my wife at the time, because I can still remember what the woman looked like that was in my kitchen that I was having this conversation with.
What did she look like?
She had short white hair. She was about 6 foot tall, thin, in a dark suit that was tight around her with like dark gloves on. Huge blue eyes, abnormally large. So the same kind of
Annie Lennox. That's what it sounds like.
I know who that is.
yeah, right. Wow. Okay, continue.
So now this is where I lose a lot of people, because and sometimes in my first book in particular, I tried to separate my own experiences and anecdotes for people and stuff to the end of the book, and tried to be as objective as possible for the first part of the book, just building CT profiles and looking for the beings that I already know in history and in other people's contact events. I found them in the Nahuatl, the Gaelic fairies, and I found them in Charles Hall's books, and I found them as well in Chris Bledsoe's case. In my opinion, definitely the same race, even down to them galloping on all fours, children galloping on all fours, which Chris Bledsoe and his son saw in the famous Fayetteville incident in 2007, when the beings were chasing the truck and they were galloping like antelope. Very distinctive profile point. Charles Hall mentioned that as well. And I have memories from when I was a kid of small beings doing that with larger dark beings with glowing red eyes watching on. And this is as well where Cully Cale's case comes to bear as well. Cully Cale, the experiencer in Australia, famous, been on your show, hasn't she, dude? You were saying to me before the show a while back, Jimmy. She had an abduction event, major one, in 1993 in South Belgrave. Dark beings, glowing red eyes. Chris Bledsoe sees beings, glowing red eyes. This is a particular aspect of their technology that I call a Boas suit, named after Antonio Villas Boas, which is another case from 1957 in Brazil where he saw dark suits, and I have to call them something, so I just call them Boas suits now. But they seem to be a stealth suit, military grade suit, and a lot of interactions with tall whites occur with them dressed in this manner. And I've seen them dressed in that way when I was younger, and then in more recent times as well in my room. My wife has seen them now as well. With this technology, the suit seems to be able to become intangible, move through solid objects and walls. They can levitate. Long dark claws on their fingers as well, which is some kind of prosthetic addition, which is for defense, I think. And telepath tech. Something built into their helmets. An ability to instill images into your mind, abstract notions into your mind, or even speak directly into your mind, like an inner monologue. Like some people, when they're reading a book, they have an inner monologue. I don't know if you do, Jimmy. Some people do, some people don't. If you're reading a novel to yourself, do you hear a voice sort of to yourself that's your own voice, or is there just nothing?
Oh, you're asking me.
Yeah,
That is a great question. and yeah.
Some people do hear one.
I don't know. We all do.
You do. Some people don't. Some people don't. But apparently, they're
lying. They're lying if they say that they don't hear a voice, because
it's like that. It's like that. But when they communicate, it's like that, but expressed much faster than a person would normally speak, and also with a slight thump. And sometimes when it happens when they're particularly close, my ears pop as well. And it's like a silent voice, but it's spoken at a much faster rate. It's communicated at a much faster rate. It's still linguistic in that it's in English or whatever language they're speaking, but it's communicated at a much faster speed than that a sentence could be expressed just by like me speaking right now. And, Charles Hall famously had this happening to him a lot. Chris Bledsoe has this happen to him. I believe Peter Curry's had these things. Peter Curry's another Australian experiencer, which in my opinion is also a contactee of the same beings again, these Charles Hall tall whites. And he famously had an experience I think his big experience, the Hair of the Alien one, was 1992. Bill Chalker, Australian ufologist, wrote an excellent book about that. I recommend The Hair of the Alien. He'd had earlier experiences and childhood experiences and stuff like that as well, Peter Curry. But again, tall, fair people, huge blue eyes, chirping sounds, profile points. These are all points on the profile, including the dark suits. Including
now, let's go back for a second, because you made a really interesting point. Let's go back to Annie Lennox in your kitchen, if we can, because you had said right after that, this is where I lose people. So let's actually stay on that point for a second. I'm just going to call her Annie. Okay. So anyway, did Annie look human to you? And two-part question: was that a conscious experience, or was it not a physical experience? So let's go to the first part. Could she pass as human?
No, not entirely. Like for her to pass as human, she would have to be, a lot of her face would have to be covered. Her eyes are just too large. Like perhaps like the actual orbs of her eyes are probably like 2 or 3 times the size of ours. So, and her face too long, too elongated, and the chin too pointed. Like Peter Curry said about one of his experiences, almost like a witch's chin, he described it as. A different facial structure, very, very thin as well. There are Homo sapiens that are as thin as she was, but not many, emaciated in appearance. And I'm certain it was a physical interaction. to the second, if that's what you were saying for the second part. That it wasn't some kind of a dream or an intrusion into my dreams or anything like that. That it was a tangible, real waking.
Right, and she called it a date. That's pretty interesting, by the way.
I think it was in reference. That was in reference to me actually inviting them. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah,
I can understand what you're saying just by you using that word. That makes a lot of sense. That's what you do. A date is a date. You circle it. You put it on a calendar. That's why it's called a date, right? Now,
yes.
But your wife is in bed. Do you so that means at some point you were in bed too before. What made you wind up in the? Did she want to be seen? That's my point.
The woman, yes,
she
did want to be seen, yeah, and we were talking for a fair while. I can't remember what about, unfortunately, but so that's a major experience, and I've had other ones that are even more intense. I had another one just about a year ago that was me up and about. I hadn't gone to bed. I was still up in the kitchen. And I had a feeling in my head like I knew that they were around, okay? And then levitated and got pulled backwards so that my head touched my knees and then was whipped outside to some kind of craft or something. And then was in a passageway, flailing about, knocking my thing. So then was in some kind of craft with a purple planet nearby. And I was thinking, I hope my kids don't wake up in the middle of the night and call out for me because I won't be there. So there's lots of experiences I've had like that. Now, a lot of people listen to that and say, I'm not really interested in hearing any of your other research because that's just too far out there. And it colors and taints a lot of the research I've done in regards to like the more objective kind of stuff, looking for them, seeking them, knowing myself what they're like and what they look like, and then seeking them in other people's cases, and things like that. Some people prefer to hear about these kind of anecdotes and aren't interested in the more dry, investigatory stuff. But it is something that I'm uncomfortable with talking about, even though I do, just for the simple reason that it's not nice for everyone to presume, A, you're either not quite right in the head, or B, you're not a truth teller. I don't like to be considered a liar. But most people automatically just presume one or the other, and that's kind of it's an uncomfortable thing. But nonetheless,
screw them. And this is why I used to talk like that too. Like I've seen something strange and I shouldn't really talk about this because people will think, you know what? I don't care anymore. And I understand some people may be making stuff up. I get that. And some of it is just complete fiction, but I have seen enough crazy stuff that I know that there is something going on with this phenomenon that we don't understand, and that there are others out there that do know what's going on and are not telling the truth about it. This is fact. That is fact. That is not conjecture. That is not a theory. That is not a dream. That is not science fiction. It's none of that. Those are the facts. And so when I tell somebody some crazy thing, I understand what's coming out of my mouth, and I know what it must sound like to somebody, but I don't care. I don't care. I just don't. And so you have to share. The more that you share, it lets other people know that it's okay. All right. It's okay to talk about. You don't have to understand everything. We don't have the answers to we don't have the answer, not only to the UFO phenomenon, we don't even know what gravity is. Okay. We don't even know what gravity is. So don't worry about it. There's a lot that we don't understand. Right. And, there is a general interest with the fantastical. That's the incorrect use of that word. That means you're a fan of something, but then it does kind of imply the pop culture version of that is just something that's extraordinary. Okay, so, but people, how many times can we hear the story about a stainless steel examination table? How many times can we hear that story? So what was the inside of the craft like? Well, it was like this. And it was like, how many times? But people want to hear that. So I get that. But, and those are the facts of the case. But you've got to, like you're saying, you got to get behind it. You got to build that profile. Let's get to the truth of what's behind it. And to a lot of people, that's too mundane. It's too much work. They want the instant satisfaction of, okay, so was the female alien hot? You know, and I get it. Okay, all right. I get that. I totally get it. I get it. I get it. So that's okay. But
both sides. I've had a negative reaction from people who aren't interested in the dryness, as I said before, or others that are just like, man, I was kind of interested in what you had to say until I found out that you're an experiencer, and it's like, no. But I in my first book, as I said, most of the book, I'd be as objective as possible and don't put my stuff in it until the very end. The second book, I thought I'll just integrate my own experiences into the investigation, the continued investigation and cryptoterrestrial profile building. I'll integrate my own experiences here and there, and if they're appropriate, throughout the whole book, seamlessly, kind of, which is what I ended up doing the second time. But I don't like in the past, in regards to this and being, embarrassed or uncomfortable about admitting, some of the interactions and stuff like that, and some of the claims seem just too bizarre. I've thought maybe I should have not talked about them and just been a researcher but I thought, no, that's not good, because in a sense that's deceit through omission. This is a big part of my life. It's the reason that I was interested in this in the first place. I wouldn't have been intensely investigating their presence unless I were actually having these experiences, as I am. And so they had to be included in the end. And I still find it uncomfortable talking about it sometimes, but I just have to put up with it.
Yeah, you're right, though. It is deceit with omission, and then you have to carry that guilt and that burden, and you don't want somebody to find out in the future, and come back to you and go, dude, I read all your books. What do you mean that happened? How come you didn't tell us that before? Well, I was, I don't do an Australian accent, but if I did, I would do it. But anyway, I needed to remain objective, right? I need to, I just wanted to do the research. That's not going to be good enough for anybody. You can't, man. So,
I didn't want to scare people off. That would have been the reason that I would have done that. And that's not a good reason, in my opinion.
No, it's not. Screw them. I did this. I did, check this out. I never thought that this would happen to me, but I had. I'll keep this very, very brief. I had said for many years, I'll just say 10 years. I said for 10 years that I would never do a session. I would never do regression. Okay. I don't want to know. I'm happy with my life. If something happened that I don't know about or I don't remember, cool. I don't want to know, right? Okay. All right. So I left it. So what did I do? I turned around, and last year I did a regression, and I did it for TV. I've played some of the clips for it. You can go and watch it, but that's not the point. The point is the crazy stuff coming out of my mouth that I didn't know about and I'm listening to it, and I'm thinking to myself exactly what you're going through. Am I now the crazy person? Right? The one that people talk about, right? Am I now that guy? Am I that? And we have to really stop and consider the phenomenon itself, because my experience that that was revealed to me through therapy, through regression, through hypnosis, was so nuts and so crazy. But I went through the process of regression. So I have that experience, and I'm able to talk about it and not only firsthand experience, but when I hear other people talk about it, I know exactly, I'm not coming from a place of no experience. Yeah. So if I have to listen to everybody, because I've got a crazier story than you. So, right? So that's okay. That's okay.
I've never had regression, by the way. I've never actually done that. I have sort of tried self-hypnosis, and trying to access memories and things like that. Apparently Charles Hall had moderate success at that kind of stuff. But I've never actually had a professional.
And you've got Mary Rodwell in your backyard. Give her a call. She's amazing. She's amazing. Okay. Before we go to the break, which we're going to do in 2 minutes, you mentioned, by the way, the stream that's going out to Spotify and Spreaker and 20 other networks. Not the video, but the audio. Keeps dropping. So I don't know what that is. So everybody that is listening here now, because you're not picking it up there, I apologize, but it's never happened before. You mentioned a purple planet. What did you see? And do you think that you were physically there, or that it was projected to you?
Well, I think it was physical again.
Yeah. So what did you see? How can you describe it?
Well, it was a craft in orbit over this. I could see the curvature of the planet, or the moon, or whatever it was, with vibrant pink and purple hues to it. I went further along the passage, came out into an area where there was a huge woman with long, lank white hair, really long hands, like twice as long as our hands, pointing up at devices up on the wall. And there was a tall man that looked like a priest and had it kind of looked like, actually, like a we'll just say like a Tibetan Buddhist or something like that, in the gear, just in the kind of robes he was wearing. And I was talking to him. I can't remember what he said. And then I was back again, and I said in my mind, "You returned me." And they said, "That is correct." That one, and also the one in the kitchen that I talked about with the woman, they're particularly powerful to me because I hadn't gone to bed. These are waking encounters or events. And I'm still awake when they finish, and they returned me, and I was just back in a room. I wasn't back in bed. And that's an oddity, even for my own weird encounters.
Yeah, right. Okay. Ryan, stay right there. This is Fade to Black, everybody. Ryan Musgrave-Evans live from Australia. This is Fade to Black. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. This is Jimmy Church. Please visit and explore Egypt this October 3rd through the 14th, 2024 with Billy, Elizabeth, myself, and very special guest and the #1 podcaster in the world, Sean Kelly. It's simple to do. Just go to forbiddenknowledge.com and click on upcoming tours, or click on the link below. We'll see you there. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black T-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 T-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. And right now, if you get a Game Changer membership for a limited time, you will get Fade to Black Blend coffee with your Game Changer membership. That's right. We have 2 T-shirts. We have the original, the classic Fade to Black T-shirt. You know you want one. Post a picture, send it to us. We'll put it in our Fade to Black gallery. And we've got the new official Fade to Black T-shirt drawn by Michael Oming. 2 T-shirts, 2 ways to get them. Get yours today. Everything is in stock. Everything gets autographed. Everything includes shipping. And you're going to get a tracking number. And with the Game Changer membership, you get an email to me. You get unlimited commercial-free downloads of the show. Those are uploaded every single night after the show to the website. So don't delay. Get your Fade to Black T-shirt today. Go Beckley Teppy. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Live from Australia, Ryan Musgrave-Evans is with us. Cryptoterrestrials, why are they here?
they seek to repair their failing genomes. It gets quite complicated, and I'm calling them cryptoterrestrials, and we've talked about why in the first segment, that I agree with Mac Tony's, that they have some kind of genetic relationship with us, and therefore have some kind of indigenous relationship with this earth. But then it gets a little bit more complicated. Now, they are, in a sense, a future version of us, genetically impoverished for different reasons, for largely to do with deliberate genetic interference on their part, trying to manipulate their own lifespans, which have effectively increased. But this has also had negative side effects to other aspects of their life and existence. They're weaker now. They have a lot of allergies, and they seek to, through our strong stock, through our old archaic genome from their perspective, are trying to reinforce and rebuild and produce a stronger version of themselves again. So that's they're very interested in that, and they're very interested in keeping us healthy. I consider ourselves to be something like we're free-range archaic humans to them. They don't interfere with us too often, although they're permanently here, under our oceans, under our national parks, within mountains and things like that. More or less, for the most part, we're unaware of them, unless they want us to be aware of them here and there. But it's this genetic need. They have this requirement of us. For the most part, that's the reason why they're here.
The idea of suggesting that, and the element of it may be us or a version of us from the future, that is something that is being discussed more and more. Do you think that is because we understand more about physics and science and these possibilities of future versions of ourselves being here is more acceptable and is becoming mainstream?
Yeah, I think our psychology today can deal with those kinds of ideas much better than even just a few decades ago. I think it's probable that the public is being conditioned, the human public, Homo sapiens public, conditioned through media and film and things like that, to be more accepting of these kinds of ideas. You know, you can't really watch a superhero movie or a kid's cartoon or something anymore without it being about multiple universes or the multiverse or time travel, Rick and Morty or something like that. Certainly Marvel and what's the other one? What's the other major franchise?
DC.
DC. Marvel and DC are just filled with that narrative now. And if you lay that on people now, if you say these beings are a version of us from a different timeline, most people nowadays, especially younger generations, would be like, oh yeah, that sounds fair enough. That sounds just as likely as that they're from another planet, you know. Whereas if you'd said that 50 years ago, that wasn't really part of the reality, the cultural reality. People really didn't have that kind of foundation to their understanding of possibilities in the world. Yeah. And I think slowly in this way, our society is being conditioned to consider their presence underwhelming once it's revealed. It's revealed through increments, and also through, as we're saying, like fictional, like film and TV and whatnot, customizing us to these kinds of concepts, so that once it is revealed, it will be underwhelming and it won't be a shock. Everyone will be like, oh, tell us something we didn't know. You know, I got to pay my bills. I don't really care about the cryptoterrestrials from the future living in under the sea. You know, that's the best kind of disclosure, in my opinion. One that's slowly hitting the frog in the pot. You know, maybe that's not a good analogy, because that's a little bit of a negative one. But just slowly culturally accustomizing us, acclimatizing us to thinking there's nothing that strange about the world of Rick and Morty being real, you know.
Well, when you look at, you're right about that, and Hollywood does play a big part, and I enjoy great science fiction. I do. I like the theater of the mind, and I like being taken there. But today, physics is telling us some of the craziest ideas that, and you're right, that a couple of decades ago was pure science fiction. And now Hollywood, with a movie like Everything Everywhere All at Once. Now, it's one thing to go and watch Thor or the Fantastic Four or the Marvel Universe, go watch Loki or the Star Wars franchise, whatever. You go and watch any of that. Sure. And these concepts, Quantumania, if you really watch that movie, there is some serious physics involved there. And so I applaud that, because the world sees it as entertainment, but what they're really seeing is science. And so when you see something like Everything Everywhere All at Once, okay, there's some crazy physical elements to it, but it also suggests that we could be everywhere, right? That that's it. You don't have to be shocked about it. Now, would it be better? And this is the point. Would it be better to tell the world that ET is visiting us from another planet? Or would it freak people out more to find out that it's just us from Atlantis, survivors of Atlantis, or that it's us from the future? That would be pretty difficult. I think people would really lose their minds with that aspect if what part of the reality is revealed to us. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, there's a distance to saying that it's extraterrestrials, isn't there? People can think, oh, well, they've traveled a long way to get here. The threat might be distant. It's not right here under our oceans or wherever the case may be. That might have a more negative impact on people's psychology. I'm not quite sure. Some people that I've talked to about my own books and things can get a bit freaked out and like the idea of there being beings under the earth that are here, that are kind of using us as well in certain ways. They find it to be more disturbing than the idea that they're just extraterrestrials. I do have that reaction sometimes with some people. Especially like it's an intrusion, the intrusiveness of harvesting DNA and sperm and eggs and all that kind of stuff is, and also that they've been here and are here and we're unaware of them and they're on the edges, the fringes of our world like that and have been for thousands of years. That does freak people out more sometimes, I think, in my own, peer group and friends and stuff like that and family that I've talked about these kinds of concepts with, than even, just the normal old-fashioned extraterrestrial one.
Yeah, I was just, it's already disappeared. It's a busy chat room. But there was this comment that just popped up, and it said something to the effect of, nobody has ever brought a single thing back from an alien abduction. And when I see a comment like that, that is coming from somebody that has zero information, has zero experience. It only takes, when you see something that you cannot explain, you see it, daylight sighting in the sky. When you see something like that, right there, the game has changed. That's it. That, and you would never, ever post something that stupid in a chat room. I don't
No,
know that
that's right.
person. I don't know that person. I'm not, but that is just a stupid comment, because that reveals that you do not wonder, you do not consider that life is just, it is what it is, and there's nothing else to see here. I don't know. I don't know what's going on, but something is going on. Right?
Yeah,
Sure. And
Seems believing.
I haven't brought back a T-shirt. I would love to come back with a T-shirt from one of my experiences. I would love for that to happen, but that doesn't mean
Steve Boucher. Steve Boucher, the Canadian experiencer. He tried in that his most famous abduction event when he was with his band, and they were in the van and they were taken on board a craft and inspected and things like that in 1971, I think it was. He tried to take something off the craft. He unscrewed something and had it in his hand, I think, and one of the beings just knew and said, "You're gonna have to leave that." And I think that's happened. I think Kelly Kale might have had something like that happen as well. There's been a few instances where people have given it a go, apparently.
Yeah,
keeping a keepsake,
Yeah, I want your comment on this. It seems that everything, when it comes that we're not ready to understand, so it's always at just beyond our reach. Right? It's always just a little, because some things we're not supposed to understand right now. And it's a really fascinating concept, because if you go back throughout history, this show that we're talking about right now, these subjects that we're talking about right now, is no different than Zeus, is no different than Ra, is no different than Horus, is no different than God, is no different than Yahweh, or angels and demons and ghosts and everything. It's no different than any of the demigods that have been referenced in every culture around this planet. Period. There is no difference in the conversation. There isn't. What is different about what you are talking about right now through your experiences and Cryptoterrestrials and anything else from history? What's the difference? Is there a difference?
Yes, I personally think there's no difference at all. Literally no difference, in that most ancient religious experiences or experiences with supernatural beings are identical to the ones today. They're seen through a different lens, interpreted in different ways, different languages, different worldviews, perspectives. But the underlying cause is the same as these people, these beings interacting with us. Sometimes we worship them. It's my second book. I go into a lot about the idea that even our world religions have been seeded, not necessarily deliberately by these beings, but a lot of it has been spawned by their presence, been inspired by their presence. And humans as storytelling creatures, if we become aware that there are other people that are different to us, that can levitate and glow and sometimes come into our houses at night and take things and then return them, and they seem to come up out of the mountains, sometimes down from the sky and things like that. If we don't know their backstory, that's not going to stop us from making one up. We're storytelling creatures. We'll give them different relationships. We'll say they're the god of the water or the weather, and they're related to this one over here, and all this kind of stuff. And we'll fill in the soap opera drama between the cracks that we don't understand from a very tangible, real, concrete presence of flesh and blood advanced beings. Given rise, and then, religions change, superstitions change, and it's a game of telephone through the ages. People remembering back genuine contact at different stages throughout history. Still represented in ritual, in art, in religion. I don't think in my opinion, no belief systems are immune to this influence, that progenitive power of these people being real, being there, being advanced, being godlike, and seeding all of these beliefs in us, and sometimes deliberately interfering in our belief systems as well. But sometimes just being their very presence spawning this kind of stuff, as I said.
Isn't the term, and I don't want to be, I don't want to sound insensitive here, but isn't the term little green men interchangeable with leprechaun? That's just in a generality, right? But
yeah, there's a continuity there, I suppose.
Yeah. Only because throughout history, whether it's passed down as folklore or mythology, or it's a story that exists in a family and it's retold, but it comes from something, right? And so it gets turned into, right, the troll under the bridge, or a leprechaun or a fairy, when in reality the interaction was there, but they didn't have the words and the vocabulary or even science, right, to apply to it. So it gets turned into something else over time. But when you look at it in its totality, that there has been interactions with something for thousands of years, right?
Yeah, and continuous, I think, or here and there, sporadically. Sometimes maybe generations of people will forget and change stories about certain interactions that happened in their past to their ancestors and things like that. But then there'll be fresh contact again for whatever reason, and that reinforces the beliefs, For sure, I agree, and I very much think that that's what's been happening for a very long time throughout our history.
How do you think the communication happens? Let's talk about that for a second, because you pointed at your forehead earlier, and clearly you're understanding it. But that type of communication probably happens across the universe, right? And it's there. How is that going down? And is it in a language? How is the communication understood?
Well, in my case, it's beings that are nearby, that are in the vicinity, that are doing it anyway. And it's usually in English, but it can be in Gaelic. And that's when it's linguistic. Like I said before, it can be linguistic, so it's verbal, but it's a silent voice, kind of like the internal monologue when you're reading a book or something. Sometimes it's more obviously feminine voice, sometimes masculine, sometimes neither, but fast and almost like a tangible, almost like it feels like it's three-dimensional in some way, and not just like an audio, sort of two-dimensional sort of audio. But also there is the communication of abstract concepts that aren't linguistic. It's in ufology, it's a common thing to talk about people having downloads and things, of course, where suddenly they feel that they've had knowledge or information or data imparted to them directly that wasn't verbal, but suddenly they have this understanding of something that they didn't before, conceptually. So there's linguistic, there's abstract, and then there's also visual. Like there's been a few experiences I've had where other scenes or images will pass across my mind's eye that seem intrusive and not from my own mind, but sometimes pleasant things, perhaps as an attempt to calm me if I'm nervous in an interaction. One time, and this freaks people out sometimes when I tell people about this particular interaction I had, where I was in bed and a dark shape came to the side of me, and then the dark shape was no longer there, and there was just an image of my bedroom ceiling, and I could see, like, out of the corner of my vision a little bit, that there was a chest of drawers and a cupboard and things like that. And I turned my eyes and the image stayed the same. So it didn't matter that I was turning my eyes and looking in different directions. The image was fixed, a freeze frame of the top of my room. And then I felt their hands on me, and one rolled me over and pushed me down onto the bed, and actually my head got twisted around to the side. While all this was happening, and I could feel it happening physically, it's completely real, it felt to me, I was still just seeing the ceiling in my room. Like they'd hijacked my vision, but it wasn't being updated. So it was so bizarre. You know, you'd think if you were going to put a false image so that someone doesn't know what's going on while you're doing some medical thing on them, that you'd be updating the image. So that was very bizarre. So it seems that they can also do that, and other experiences have had that kind of stuff happen. You know, they can hijack your vision and present you with unrealities. You know.
Well, that's the next stage of evolution for humans, is to understand that what we can't see, consciousness, right? And to be able to manipulate that. I've said it so many times. We've taken technology as far as we can go, right? But that's all in the physical. Circuits getting smaller and faster and things, and okay, that's what we consider technology, and we've taken things as far as we can go. Now we can make it smaller and faster, but we're still dealing with the physical things, plastics and metals and substrates and all of that stuff, and gases. But the next step will be how to manipulate and understand consciousness, and ET or an advanced being would have that and would understand how to do that. I find that just to be a fascinating concept. And ET with us, when it comes to communication, here's the thing. What I saw, and I've done thousands of interviews and just so many, and I've never heard anything like this, but this is what I saw. I saw and heard them speaking. I watched their mouths move. There was a bunch of them there, but one was talking. This is what I said, so I have to go with it. I said they were speaking Californian.
Yeah.
Right? And I was and I could see the side of his face, so I could see blah, 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 right. I could see his mouth moving, and I heard what's coming out of his mouth, and I didn't even pay attention to it. I heard what he's saying. I remember what was said, but I wasn't shocked. It was weird, man. It was like really, it was like really weird. I didn't freak out. It seemed so natural to me.
That's a recurring feature in the genuine contact events like that, where it's a capacity they have to make you apathetic. Something that would be freaking you out normally or be bizarre, you're just like, yeah, that's happening, and you're not really having an emotional reaction. The critical faculties in your brain aren't really kicking in. And as for the linguistic thing itself, even the fairies themselves were said to be able to speak all kinds of language in any accent. Depending on who they're talking to, and certainly in UFO lore nowadays, it's repeated that's the way of it. Charles Hall himself talked about some of the tall whites being able to speak perfect American English and others not being able to speak English at all. The linguistic side of it's very, very interesting. Did you want to talk about the linguistic stuff at all? I do.
That's why I brought it up, and I think it's important. Not only to understand this and do a deeper dive into it, but it is a big part of the experience. And for me, just personally, when I saw it go down the way that it did, one of the beings, and they were black, by the way. There was no blonde hair and blue eyes here. They were black and fuzzy, not hairy, out of focus. But the point is, one of them turned and looked at me, or two of them, but you know what they did? They went like this. I'm not kidding. They went like this. They go like that, like, "Hey man, what's up?" And then turned around, and I swear, my reaction was, "Huh, okay, all right." And I just kind of take it all in, and I kind of see what's going on. It just lasted for a few seconds, but you're right. You're 100% right. It was this comfort thing. It was weird, man. I in no way freaked out. Not at all. No, I got when you walk into a party, you walk into a room full of people, and you're kind of getting the lay of the land, and somebody in the middle of the room just kind of looks at you and gives you one of these. You're at ease. You're immediately at ease, right? That's all you want, and that's what happened. I got one of these. Yeah. What's up, man? What's up? I was like, no way, man.
Yeah. That's beautiful stuff. The familiarity, just puts you to ease. Yeah. I've had them speak to me in English, but also a common way for them to communicate is whistling, chirping, and barking, and mimicking wildlife. So I've heard them doing that. Charles Hall White's famously.
What are you suggesting here? That they're imitating wildlife, or this is their form of communication and their language?
Charles Hall thought it was their language. I think it's imitating wildlife. It's in my opinion, they're like cryptolects, like artificial languages for secrecy. But also in this case, I call them camo cants sometimes, like camouflage made up languages where they're mimicking wildlife. So they can switch between them to not alert you to their presence when they're in the wilderness and in national parks and things like that. Now Charles Hall interpreted that to be that was their language, but I've also heard them speaking in a guttural, resonant kind of language that kind of sounds like Japanese or Korean, which sounds much more like a natural language. And then it can flip into barking languages and things like those separate linguistic codes. Now, in my opinion,
are you talking about like I forget his name that did the recordings of Bigfoot?
Yes. Okay. So that's exactly right. I was just about to say.
Okay.
Yeah, so the Sierra Sounds in California.
Yeah, Sierra Sounds.
Ron Moorhead and Al Berry. Yeah. I talk about his recordings and that in my second book a bit, but and I've actually had a little bit of an interaction with Ron Moorhead, just talking to him about what I think those recordings are, and they're tall whites. That not only do they bark and growl and hoot like tall whites do, but they also speak in what's called samurai chatter sometimes when people are talking about the Sierra Sounds. The Sierra Sounds, the recordings in the 70s for the audience that were made by Al Berry and Ron Moorhead, where they couldn't see beings, but they could hear them, and they built a cubby for themselves, like a fort, at night because they were scared of the sounds that would come into their camp. And these recordings are online. I think there's versions of them on YouTube if people want to look.
I've had Ron on the show. Yeah, last month actually, and we played a bunch of those. But continue. They're fascinating. Fascinating.
I know that in the standard accepted, wisdom about it all, if they're real, they're Bigfoot. Like they're either A first, they're real, B, they're fakes. If you want to go down the they're real path, people just automatically, they go, well, if they're real, then they're Bigfoot, and therefore Bigfoot's real. But there's lots of cases out there of tall whites when they're heard speaking, and not just my own, but Charles Hall's as well, interactions with them when they're making animal-like noises, and also a famous Spanish case, the name of which escapes me at the moment, unfortunately, the Soria abductions in Spain in the 70s, where he was taken on board a craft. He was out hunting with his dog, and tall whites approached this man, took him on board the craft, invited him on, really. Seemed more interested in inspecting his dog. And they spoke together in barking-like language. And also, he said it sounded like an Eastern Asian language. And it sounded like the sounds that people make when they're doing martial arts. This is the way this particular guy described the language. And the way he described it, it's just perfectly represents, like perfectly reflects the sounds of the Sierra recordings. And I've heard them in my house making these kinds of noises. I've had them speak to me in this kind of Japanese-like sounding or Korean-like sounding. It's not Japanese or Korean. There's little parts of it that I understand. There's a few words here and there. Agaling is black star, which is part of sort of like a belief system they have about the nature of reality. Is to do with the black star. Anyway, I don't know much of it, but it certainly sounds to the ear of a Westerner like us as though it's some kind of like Japanese or Korean. I'm completely convinced that the Sierra sounds. I have absolutely no doubt, but I'm sure there's lots of people that don't agree with me and are very invested in the idea that the Sierra sounds are real and also evidence of Bigfoot. But to those people, I'd suggest you look into tall white abductions and the even in 1957, the case of the Brazilian Villas Boas, when he was abducted, the beings were shorter, but they were white. It takes them a long time to grow. This is also part of the profile of tall whites. It takes them a very long time to grow. They can be about 5 foot tall, and they'll be about 50 years old. And if you're seeing one that's like 7 or 8 foot tall, they're going to be hundreds of years old. It takes them a long time to grow. So just because Villas Boas's ETs or CTs that he was interacting with were short does not mean that they weren't tall whites, although short ones. They barked and growled as well. There's many cases out there. Even though I've talked to Chris Bledsoe about this in the past, and he said that he hasn't heard them making sounds like that. But I noticed in his recent book, when he was having an experience, he said he was hearing dogs barking over in an area where he didn't think any dogs were. And I was thinking, that's them. You know, they use these ways of interaction because there's nothing like a human voice in the wilderness to prick someone's ears. You know, if you're a hiker or a soldier or a walker, if you hear someone speaking, automatically your attention's engaged. Roaming through these kinds of different codes. Man,
that's fascinating. And let me stop you there, Ryan. Let me tell you why that is such an extraordinary point. The first thing you hear when you're born is your mom's voice. It's the first thing. The programming starts. You are trained to hear the human voice first. Period. That's it. And what's the second thing that you learn? What's the second thing? The human face. That's it. You're looking at your mom's face. So you could insert dad there too as well, but dad comes after mom. That's number 2. Yeah. But so when you're out, you're in the forest or you're on a city, so you're walking through the neighborhood and you're looking around and how you don't notice the houses, you don't notice it. But if you see a human, you will automatically say, you will see that. if you can hear dogs bark, you can hear noise, you can hear cars. That stuff just goes by you. You hear a human voice, you stop and you're listening to the conversation, no matter where it's coming from. So, yes, that is such a fantastic point to stop and make. If they are out in wherever talking in something that we can understand, we would pay attention. So how do you run stealth? Don't talk.
Yeah.
Chirp.
Yeah, or mimic wildlife of the area.
Chirp. Yeah, chirp. Yeah, absolutely. That is a fantastic point.
Massive coincidence that that the tall whites that Charles Hall met in the Nevada desert just happened to sound like animals that lived in the surrounding area. He said they sounded like coyotes. They sounded like meadowlarks. They sounded like horses. These are all animals that are present there. And the likelihood of them having evolved a natural language and being from elsewhere, and they just so happen to sound like the animals that are populating, that are present in the area, is very, very unlikely. But and in the case of the Sierra Sounds itself, and Ron Moorhead, people often are confused by there being a mixture of sounds in those recordings. So that it's like they sound like they're hooting, and they sort of sound like maybe there's monkey noises, dogs snarling and things like that. But then there's human voices in amongst it that sound like they're in a samurai movie, or they're in an anime or something. There's these deep resonating sort of typical sort of Japanese masculine sort of voices, and some high pitched ones, I think, mixed in. And people are like, what's going on there? Why does there seem to be human language intermixed with animal languages? That's the reason, because they're switching codes. They know lots of languages, and Ron Moorhead and Al Berry were just so incredibly fortunate to be able to hear them speaking in their natural language rather than just the animal sounds that most people hear. In Charles Hall himself only ever heard them speaking in animal camouflage languages, it would seem. Those recordings are just such a special thing for that reason for me.
Yeah. I love those recordings. I'll never forget the effect it had on me the first time that I heard them. Your imagination just takes off, right? It was pretty incredible. And you could tell it was interaction. It was, you know what I mean? It was sounded like an argument to me, actually. One of them sounded like an argument.
Being analyzed, you know.
Can we back up for a second? You had mentioned earlier, and before we run out of time, you said that your wife had an experience too as well. Can you tell us about that? I don't want that to get away from us.
Well, she has had experiences as well, not as intense and as obvious, but she did have an experience. I think it was a few months ago. I was in a different room and I couldn't move. I was aware, but I couldn't move, and suddenly I felt incredibly hot. And she was in bed. And when I talked to her about it the next day, she said that she had felt the same, that she couldn't move, and then there was some tall person with glowing eyes standing in the doorway.
Whoa.
I heard voices though, but not voices in my head, voices in the house. So I was awake, but sitting up on the couch, and suddenly I couldn't move anymore. And I could hear them talking to each other in the Japanese like sounding language, their natural language. And then in the morning when I told her about it, I said I had an experience, but I couldn't see them. But they have cloaking technology as well, which is part of their toolkit, which sometimes is incredibly effective. You wouldn't even know they were there. Sometimes it's blurry and kind of looks like the predator. But she had an experience, which she doesn't often have, the same night, probably at the same time, with someone tall standing in the doorway to her bedroom with glowing eyes, and she couldn't move either. So they enacted that technology on us, which they do just to keep us safe and them safe and things like that.
How did that affect her?
She just took it in her stride, really. She's She's a fairly down-to-earth person, and she believes this kind of thing's happening to me, and she has now had experiences herself like that, but it doesn't seem to faze her very much. She's just matter of fact about it. She's just like, okay, this is happening now.
Now,
which is good. I think that's a good reaction.
How much exactly? How much of this do we attribute to a ghost phenomenon?
That's another thing. Okay, so this I've talked about in my books as well, and I especially go into it in the second one. But a lot of what is considered to be ghost phenomena is them as well, in my opinion. There's a lot of paranormal activity that could be attributed to them, really, when it comes down to it. But dark shadow people, people moving around your house at night, footsteps on the staircase, footsteps on the roof, sounds of people chattering or laughing or talking to each other, moving around your house, or even seeing people that you think that might be deceased, and you think you had a hallucination in the middle of the night or something like that. All of these things are potentially them, because this is house hauntings are a part of many UFO experiences' life. As it's a lot of people that are experiencers also have shadow people in their life, and they might see UFOs, or they might have abduction events in their life, and these things will come in tandem with shadow people, voices in their houses, ghosts, people walking through walls, and all this kind of stuff. And why do those things come together? Because they're the same cause, which is these beings with advanced technologies that can become invisible, can manipulate your mind, can put you to sleep or control you, can even make themselves look like someone that that may even be deceased or whatever, even those kinds of possibilities. So, for instance, a famous example that most people listening to your show, I think, would be aware of is Chris Bledsoe. I don't know if you've ever had Chris Bledsoe on your channel, Jimmy.
Many times. Been on my TV show good. Too. Yeah.
Oh, nice one. Yeah, Chris Bledsoe's famous example of these in concert, high-level UFO-related high-tech abduction events, shadow people, ghosts, disembodied voices, angels, demons, etc. It all goes together. I call them the dudes. They're all the one. Well, there's a few different races. There's about 4, but there's one in particular that's responsible for most interaction with us, and it's these same ones, Charles Hall's Tall Whites. I believe that Charles Hall and Chris Bledsoe are friends, and they've also considered the possibility that the beings met by Charles are the same beings interacting with Chris. I think, yes, they definitely are. They're the same beings that I interact with. And in my opinion, Peter Curry as well, Kelly Kale. There are other kinds of beings, but these ones are the ones that I have a particular interest in, just because it's personal,
my house is haunted. All right.
Right.
Now, and that is generalizing things a bit much. Okay, but I look at it as crazy as I am with UFO research and my own experiences and everything. Okay, so there's that. I understand, but that's a separate thing. My house and what goes on here, it's friggin' haunted. So, right. I don't know if they bleed over. And what if, and I say this all the time, what if the phenomena is just one single thing that we don't understand? It's really just that. We just don't understand it. And that ghosts and Bigfoot and ET and lights in the sky and orbs, and it's all the same thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? Sure. Yeah, taking different forms, doing different stuff, but it's just something that we don't understand, that one key core thing. Here's a classic example. I'm in bed. It's happened to me more than once, but this one specifically. I'm in bed and I've got my iPad in its stand. I'm lying sideways. Okay. Lights are off. iPad's on and I'm reading. And as I'm reading, a hand pushes me in the middle of my back. Okay. And I'm sideways and it right? I think, and I let it go. I did not turn around.
Yeah.
I didn't want to see. I didn't want to know. But I physically moved, right? And felt it.
Yeah.
But I said to myself, that's my ghost. Okay. All right. Could it be just the phenomena in general? And quite possibly. Now, see what happened to me, and it's happened to hundreds of millions of people. I'm not planting a flag here. Right? This goes on all the time. But people associate those kinds of events as paranormal and ghost activity and poltergeist activity. They're not associating it with anything else. And I think that one day we'll find out that the phenomena is just one thing. That it's just one key thing that we don't understand.
Yeah, I'm with you there, man, for sure. Even Charles Hall knew quite well who and what he was interacting with in that he saw them with his own eyes, even during the day. Sometimes they'd meddle with his mind, but sometimes not. Full waking interactions with them, and sometimes they'd come and they'd move his stuff around at night, and they'd leave traces that had been there. Now, if he hadn't known that those beings were doing it, he would have presumed that his weather shack was haunted. And most people are presuming that their houses are haunted. It's as though it's a go-to cultural assumption, I suppose. And in Western culture, it's just we watch it in movies and we talk about it all the time to each other from generation to generation, that if you've got certain profile points happening in your house that we've listed before, seeing intangible people, shadow people, feeling hands on yourself or hearing a voice or whatever, that it's going to be a disembodied human spirit or something. It's going to be a ghost. Something happened in your house, before you bought it, maybe someone died in it, all this, and we'll tell stories to each other, and everyone will be in agreement. Yes, ghosts, or this phenomenon of being touched like you were, or seeing people, hearing voices, things like that, is caused by humans that were once alive that aren't anymore. And most people don't even question that, and that's it. It ends there, But I think, people like myself, but like Chris Bledsoe, like Charles Hall, and like many, many, many others, and like yourself, Jimmy, can see that there's that connection there because they have more of an overt insight into another side of it, beyond just the ghost-like side, but the more physical, tangible side of ET-like beings or CTs or whatever you want to call them as well. That goes hand in, like it's the other side of the same coin. It's just that usually one side of the coin's invisible to most people. Some people it isn't. But yeah, for sure, I agree.
Yeah, and here's my latest. All right. This is going to sound really stupid. All right, but it's just a story. I get this is last week. I get a black leather keychain, okay, and for a key fob. I had a lot of key fobs. We all do, and I've got a pair of key fobs, so I want one with one tag on it, one with the other tag. I take it and I put it on the island in my kitchen, sitting right there, right? And reminding myself to put it on the key fob later on that day, and which I don't do. The next day I get up, this is last week, I'm making my coffee. I walk by and I look at the key fob or the black leather keychain. Oh, don't forget, right? There it is. I make my coffee, right? 2 days ago, I walk through the kitchen in the morning and I look down and it's gone. So I go and I'm making my coffee and I just turn around. I'm looking at the island and I'm looking around from the other side of the kitchen looking for it. Right? Just kind of, making my coffee, doing my thing. I'm like, man, did I move it? Did I put it on the fob? And I go back to the island and I look where it had been sitting for 3 days, right? And
where it should have been.
I live alone. Okay, I can't blame this on my kids or a wife or a dog. Right? Can't do that. So and my house is really kind of moving my stuff around, and I'm like, what? Where'd it go? It's not here. Now, today, it's still not here. Okay, so I spent all day yesterday looking for it. I look for it again today. And did I move it? It's gone. Dude, I didn't touch it. I was reminding myself, Ryan, to touch it and put it on the fob. And now it's gone. It's gone. It's frigging gone.
That's a common profile point. Sorry.
Yeah. I can't
explain. The fairies allegedly did that kind of stuff. It's in the fairy lore, moving things, replacing them. I've had that kind of stuff happen. My parents have that happen as well to them sometimes. My parents have had interesting things happen to them as well. But
somebody just said,
and then it's back where it was meant to be.
Somebody just said maybe the fairies moved it. Fairies are real. I don't know if they're mini ETs or what the deal is. But I remember my first fairy experience, Ryan. We're at the end of the show. I don't have time to get into this. But my first fairy experience, I'm like, what am I going to do with this? Me, big, rough, tough, gnarly Jimmy Church, punch somebody in the throat, right? And I'm about to go on the air and tell a fairy story. Oh man, here we go. But it doesn't change the experience. And yeah, fairies are real. I don't care. And that's the other part. See, but that's the other part. And I do want to thank you for a great show, and I look forward to our next conversation that we have in the future. But when we look at stuff like that, and we call it mythology, we call it folklore, all of it has a base, not a basis, a base in reality.
Yeah, for sure. For sure it does. Yeah. Concrete, material reality. Definitely. Regardless of what our minds think and how they can be tricked.
Now, how often do you put up new material on your channel?
Not very often anymore, actually. I may start doing so again. And I think I've been annoying some of the viewers on my channel because I've been making videos not in English, but in interlingua, it's just a hobby of mine at the moment. And I might stop doing that again at some stage, but I'll see what happens. But not very often. But the name of my channel is Ryan Musgrave-Evans. It's just my name, and people are interested. There is stuff on there that's older, that's in English, and about my experiences and things like that. And my books are on Amazon, by the way, if anyone's interested. Children of Orion and Clan of the Black Star. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got the links up for your books in Amazon in the chat,
Thanks.
and we'll have it over in your bio on our website too as well. Ryan, thank you so much. Perfect show tonight, my man.
Thanks
you
so much for having me, man. Great fun, dude. Cheers.
I'll talk to you. Ryan Musgrave-Evans, what an excellent, perfect show and a great way to start the week here on Fade to Black. And let's see, what am I doing tomorrow night? Tomorrow night, Ryan Wood, the other Ryan. Tomorrow night, Ryan S. Wood is with us. We're going to be talking about documents and the ET agenda. And, of course, his father, Bob Wood. Tomorrow night, Ryan S. Wood here on Fade to Black. What a great week we've got coming up on the show. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Thank you to Jonaside, Bill, Dex, Jessica, Dennis, Kevin, Webmasters, Drew the Geek, Music, Doug Aldrich, Intro, Spaceboys, SpaceboyMusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, and this broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your Jimmy Church. Until tomorrow night with Ryan S. Wood, I want you to be safe. Go Backley Tappy.